Good evening and welcome to this episode of Healing for the Family. These are conversations we hope will redeem the family's place as the basic unit of society. We believe at Healing for the Family that societies can only be as healthy as their families. And this season we are focusing on marriage, and we have had some wonderful conversations about marriage. And I think tonight's conversation is going to be one of my favorite conversations. If you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, we are asking you to commit by subscribing. Just click on the subscribe button, click on the notification button, so that if whenever we upload our episodes, you can be the first one to know. But karibu to Healing for the Family. Tonight, I'm joined by a wonderful couple, good friends of mine, Matt and Teleria.
Hello.
I've known Matt I've known Matt long. I've known Matt long, and through Matt, I've come to know Teleria, good friends that I love, and I'm grateful that you have agreed to come to Healing for the Family. Karibuni sana. You know some Swahili words. I walked in and
sana
kidogo sana. You know just enough to say you
Yes.
can't speak.
It's right.
Just enough to know to say I can't speak Swahili. But karibuni sana.
Asante.
Please just tell us a little bit about yourselves as a way of introduction, what you do, maybe even how long you've been in Kenya. How is it that a couple from the US is living in Kenya? Yeah. Could start with you, Matt.
Been here
So,
longer, you
yeah.
said.
So I first came to Kenya in 2011, January. Was supposed to be 1 year. I had committed to 1 year, which was 50 weeks longer than I was hoping to leave the U.S. I was thinking I'd do like a 2 or 3 week mission trip when God had talked about overseas missions.
Yeah.
So I committed to 1 year in the Kanara program at Nairobi Chapel.
Yeah.
So that was all of 2011. I landed January 7th and stayed the whole year.
Yeah.
Towards the end of that year, Bishop Oscar pulled me aside. We had a conversation. He said, "You've done a great job. We'd like you to come back as a pastor." So my 1 year turned into a second year. At the end of the second year, we had conversations about church planting, and then Bishop sent me to Liberia for a third year to plant Nairobi Chapel Church in Liberia, in Monrovia. From there, I moved to the U.S., planted a church in Chicago, and then Bishop got connected with an organization called New Thing.
Yes.
New Thing had a large global summit here in Nairobi, hosted by Nairobi Chapel, and they were only North American at that point in time. And then in that conversation, people were like, "This is a good thing. Let's take it global." And so Bishop connected me to Dave Ferguson and New Thing.
Yeah.
And Bishop said, "I want you to learn from them for 1 year, come back to Kenya, and help us to plant thousands of churches on the African continent."
Yeah.
So 2017 January, I came back to Kenya, and here I am. Now I've turned over the regional director role for Sub-Saharan Africa to a good friend of mine, Benga Sonia.
Yes.
Now I'm the global operations director for New Thing.
At New Thing. Kinara program, Nairobi Chapel, and ministry in general has this tendency of keeping you longer than
It's true.
than you expected you would be.
It's true.
Have you enjoyed it? Are you enjoying? Okay. It's all right. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Have you enjoyed being in Africa, planting churches
So much.
so much?
Sana.
It's your favorite thing to do.
I tell people, so I grew up in a small village in the U.S.,
Yeah.
very small town. I had planned to be born there, get married there, have kids there, die there, and I was okay with that.
Yeah.
When started following Jesus for real, and he called me here, I tell people it's a life I never would have chosen,
Yeah.
but now that I'm in it, I can't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah. Awesome. Welcome. Thank you for sharing who you are and what you do. And Teleria, just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so maybe I can just start at the intersection. So I was also working for New Thing starting in 2019
Yeah.
in the U.S. region, in the North American region. So I was based in the U.S., of course, born and raised there.
Yeah.
But because of New Thing, I also started to God birthed this passion for disciple making and church planting in me as well. And later in that year, I was able to come over to the Sub-Saharan African team, do some cross training, got to know them a little bit. And it was actually during that trip when I came to Africa for the first time
Yeah.
that I felt that God was making a path actually for me to come
Yeah.
and be a part of overseas missions and
Yeah.
church planting here in Africa. So
Yeah.
that's how we met. We were colleagues and then became friends.
Yeah.
And one of the key aspects of a relationship, actually, before we started dating,
Yeah.
Matt will probably get into it a bit more, but I needed help with culture. You know, I had never
Yeah.
been, I had traveled outside of the U.S. a bit, but I had never lived anywhere.
Yeah.
And he is very passionate about equipping people, but
Yeah.
also equipping the church for
Yeah.
cross-cultural relations,
Yeah.
and thriving in cross-cultural relationships. And so
Yeah.
he was definitely my coach, you know, in that early going in terms of helping me understand, you know, living outside of a place that I've never been outside of the U.S. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it was very
Yeah.
helpful to have his insight and perspective as we
Yeah.
were, even
Yeah.
as friends.
And so as colleagues, you and through that kind of mentorship or training interculture for cross cultural engagements, then you got interested
Each other.
in each other.
In each
We were
other.
interested in the same things,
It's
which
true.
drew
Yeah,
us
interested in the
It's
same thing.
true.
Yeah, true.
to
It's
being
true.
interested in each other.
It's
Drew
true.
you. Drew you. Because I was gonna ask actually. I was gonna ask how you met. Because you know you are an African American. You are a white American. So I was gonna ask. So how is it that you met and your relationship develops to the point that you think we want to get married, and how the dating, you know, your dating season, and you know how your families receive, are these things an interracial relationship? Are these things more common now in the US? Was it difficult for you dating as an interracial couple? And I think you dated long distance for a little bit. So I just want to hear that story about your dating season with, you know, whatever challenges or joys of that season may have been.
Yeah. To answer your first question, the short answer:
Yes.
how?
How?
Jesus.
Jesus.
So that's the short
Oh,
answer.
thank you,
But he'll
Jesus.
give you. He'll start with the long answer, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so very quickly, even when we were just colleagues, very quickly, we just liked each other. Like as friends, there's colleagues. There was so many things that we had as touch points to have conversations about that there was just a lot of overlap in our view of world, view of ministry, sense of humor, movies.
Yeah.
Like there were so many things that aligned. So it was easy for us to talk. And so then once there started to be, you know, those feelings, it was fairly easy for us just to continue to be friends.
Yeah.
Now from a distance.
Yeah.
So a lot of video chats, you know, a lot of Zoom, WhatsApp calls.
Yeah.
Back and forth. And then she had made a trip here, 2 work trips
Yeah.
before we were dating.
Yeah.
And then I made a trip to the US in December. So that was August, September, she was here. October, November, she was here for work. And then I was there in December into January.
Yeah.
And we got to spend some time together. And then she was back here just before COVID in March of 2020.
2020, yes.
And so there was every 2 to 3 months, there was some time where we were in person. And then when COVID happened, I got locked in the US and couldn't come back to Kenya. So then that's when our relationship really accelerated because we were able to spend quite a bit of time together, which was good.
You got locked down in the US and you got
Yeah.
married.
Yes. Yeah, but even to unpack that a bit more, I think from the beginning, so you asked, you know, as a Black American, as a white American, how does that even, because I mean, obviously we are single, but
Yeah.
also I think what was significant to point out at that point in time, I think also a tip for single people, especially if they're followers of Jesus and they're believers. Like I wasn't really looking at that point. Now
Yeah.
I'm young, you know, I'm young at heart.
Yeah.
But also, you know,
Yeah.
I'm a bit older still
Yeah.
than what most people would have wanted to be single.
Yes.
But at that point in my life, I was
Yes.
very, very, very
Yeah.
what's the word? I was just very focused
Yeah.
on what God was saying to me,
Yeah.
where he was leading me. And I remember praying a prayer, Lord, wherever it is that you want me and whatever it is that you want me to do, like I'll follow. And so it wasn't even as if I was looking for a relationship, you know,
Yeah.
when I was coming over here, it was because my eyes have been opened about this entire organization, this ministry,
Yeah.
that is equipping people to plant churches and
Yeah.
disciple. And so, like, that was my focus.
Yeah.
So when I say Jesus, I legitimately mean Jesus,
Jesus.
because my my
Jesus.
focus was not on finding a person at that
Yeah,
point. And
yeah.
so it really was, like he said, the things that we had in common,
Yeah.
many of them were superficial, like, on the surface.
Yeah.
But as we started talking, what became very clear is that God had very much aligned our vision.
Yeah.
The vision that he had for us individually,
Yeah.
the things that he was speaking to us about were very, very much aligned
Yeah.
as individuals,
Yeah.
that then made it,
Yeah. Yeah.
seamless in terms of covenant
Yeah.
and marriage. So
I'm curious, what are those superficial things? And do they matter? Do those superficial things
Yeah.
matter in terms of attraction?
I think they do matter.
They do
They
matter.
do.
Yeah.
And I think for you, because I remember you mentioning, he's been living here in Kenya. He had been before we met for a number of years.
Yes.
So even the fact that we were able to talk, like he said, movies, and there's a lot of inside jokes
Yeah.
from our own culture as an
Yes.
American,
Yes.
that a lot of Kenyans just don't get, or references from movies in the 90s or the early 2000s that he can relate and I can relate, but,
Yeah.
maybe the
Yeah.
average person here in Kenya doesn't.
Yeah.
So even those things, we were able to laugh and talk about music,
Yeah.
like, surprisingly enough, he grew up on 90s rap, which doesn't make any sense,
It doesn't.
but as a Black American,
Tupac?
Tupac
And
and
Biggie.
Biggie, all these people, so it doesn't really make sense
Yeah.
that a white guy from Wisconsin that I would interact with, and of course I grew up listening to a lot of R&B and hip hop and rap and things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those were conversations we were able to have very easily.
Sports.
Yeah.
And sports, of course, yeah. So
Yeah.
so those things helped for sure,
Yeah.
to build a friendship before
Yeah.
we were even,
Yeah.
yeah.
You guys didn't date for long though. And, I would assume that for people getting married across different cultures, there is this idea, I think, to date long enough to get to know each other and to interrogate the different backgrounds so that even expectations, marital expectations tend to be very different because of the differences in experiences. But you dated about a year and you got married. Was there, how has that played out? How did it play out? Were you, did you have any challenges dating, or because you had interests, you had similar interests, your vision was aligned, you didn't need to know too much about each other?
First, every marriage is a cross-cultural marriage.
Every marriage is a
Every
cross-cultural
marriage.
marriage.
There are just some that the gap is more obvious
Yes.
than others.
Yes.
But even if you're from the same tribe, in the same village,
Yeah.
you could even have grown up as neighbors.
Yes.
You're going to have a cross-cultural marriage.
Yes.
Oftentimes, the more you look and think like your spouse, the less you're aware of the cultural gaps,
Yes.
which can create even more issues.
Yes.
Whereas we obviously know that we're different
Yes.
and have to be aware of our differences.
Yes.
So it means we're kind of always in tune with, is
Yeah.
this a racial thing? Is this a cultural thing? Is this
Yeah.
a man-woman thing?
Yeah.
And trying to navigate, there's a large cultural gap.
Yeah.
Let's be aware of it and talk about it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in some marriages, we just assume
Yeah.
we're the same.
Yeah.
So we don't even consider that there's that gap there.
Yeah. Yeah.
We, because of, as Tulare mentioned, our stage in life, I think there's a level of maturity that we have. Our stage in our relationship with Jesus, there's a level of discernment and relationship with Him that we have.
Yeah.
And then, as she had said, our mission was so similar, and the way we had talked about it. And so there were a number of things that streamlined
Yeah.
our ability to go from dating to marriage very quickly. And then it really was a blessing for us that I was able to spend time in the U.S.
Yeah.
Because I got to meet with her friends, meet her family, be with her people, and she got to be with my people as well. So we were able to at least have an understanding of what we were getting ourselves into when it comes to families. If it was only long distance and only virtual,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have gotten married so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like what Matt has said at the beginning of answering that question, that every marriage is an intercultural marriage. And it helps to be aware that you are, even if you're the same tribe, and same color, same tribe, that because you didn't grow up together, everyone grew up in a family that had different sets of rules, different sets of, culture and practices. And then you come together as two people from different environments, there will definitely be some background issues that you're going to deal with. And I think really profound things that you have said, it helps to be aware. It helps to be aware, even though for some people like yourselves, the cultural gaps will be very obvious, but it is a fact that every marriage is an interracial,
That's true.
it's an intercultural marriage. You want to say a bit about that?
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think to his point, now our dynamics,
Yeah.
there were a lot thrown together at one time.
Yeah.
So not only were we coming from, racially different backgrounds,
Yeah.
but then I was coming to Kenya, so
Yeah.
also now experiencing a different culture, living in a different culture for the
Living in
first
it, yeah,
time.
yeah.
In addition to now being married, for the
Yeah.
first time, So I would say the first year
Yeah.
was stressful.
Yeah.
It was fun. I mean,
Yeah.
it was amazing.
Yeah.
And also there was a lot of challenges
Yeah.
that came with that, because there's a lot of different dynamics that you're navigating all at the same time, that we were navigating at the same time. So to his point, yeah, it definitely helped to fast track our relationship, given that we had a lot of time together. And because there was lockdown, we were in the same space,
Yeah.
where had it not been for COVID, to be
Yeah.
honest, we wouldn't have had that
Yeah.
time and that opportunity. So
Yeah.
so yes, I think because we were able to spend a lot of time, have a
Yeah.
lot of conversations,
Yeah.
and then when we were apart, we were having a lot of, WhatsApp chats and things like that. It did help, but at the same time, it it revealed so much once we
Yeah.
were finally in the same space. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
we're actually very different.
Yeah.
And we need Jesus.
And we need Jesus. And we need Jesus.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question. I know we are talking about marriage, but I want to ask you a question about dating. And I wonder, it may be a matter of perspective, but is there benefit to dating long, or it's okay to date? I don't know what to call it, short. Is there benefit to dating long? And what would you advise a young Christian couple dating and thinking about marriage? How do you know you're ready for marriage when you're in that season of dating? How did you know you're ready for marriage, even though you had, you know,
Me first?
Sure.
Okay.
men first?
It depends on your perspective of marriage and the institution of marriage.
Yeah.
And the individuals involved.
Yeah.
So there is identity and insecurity that's a big factor.
Yeah.
That sometimes keeps people in relationships longer than they should be. But then there's also, what is marriage for you?
Yeah.
What are you expecting to get out of marriage? What are you hoping to get out of marriage? What is the purpose of marriage? And so there's a whole number of things to unpack there.
Yeah.
So I alluded to our spiritual maturity and our emotional maturity.
Yeah.
She's one of the most secure persons I've ever met. And so I knew she didn't need me.
Yeah.
She was choosing to be with me.
Yes.
I was having to work through, and we can go in another direction, and I was having to work through a divorce. I was
Yeah.
married previously to a Kenyan. So I was going through counseling. I was working through some of my own emotional issues, which I hadn't dealt with earlier. And that season allowed me to get to a place of health.
Yeah.
And so I was also getting to a place where I didn't need her.
Yeah.
And so we were choosing to do life together because of our understanding of the institution of marriage and what God was calling us to together
Yeah.
as on mission.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if there's insecurity or identity issues,
Yeah.
sometimes we stay in relationships we know we shouldn't be in, but we don't want to admit to that. And so
Yeah.
we're making an excuse for, I'm just seeing how it goes.
Yeah.
The other thing is, for us, marriage is a commitment, not a feeling. So we chose to be together, to commit our lives to each other and to Jesus.
Yeah.
Rain or shine, good or bad, rich or poor.
Yeah.
It is for us, it's a commitment first and foremost. Now, thankfully, we like each other and we enjoy being together,
Yeah.
which you should.
Yeah.
But there's something to most arranged marriages.
Yeah.
There's a smaller percentage of divorce
Yes.
because they've just committed to make it work.
Yeah.
Whereas, the love marriages, there's a higher level of divorce
higher,
because if the
yeah.
feeling leaves,
Yeah.
then, and so most times when it's an elongated dating season,
Yeah.
we're going on our feelings,
Yeah.
not just make the commitment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't answer your question, but it's a,
No, it you've said some really good things there. Yeah. You actually said some really good things. I wonder how long I can stay on this question. But there are a couple of things you say that I think are very helpful. First, the idea of just being secure in who you are, that you don't need someone to complete you or to make you whole. You are whole as a person, and you're whole in Jesus Christ, and you understand that your identity is in Jesus Christ and not in being married. But you've also said that marriage is a commitment. It's not a feeling. It's a choice you make. And I wonder whether it will be safe to say this, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. I wonder whether it would be safe to say, with what you have just said, I wonder, then why not just get married? I mean, if you are secure in who you are, in your identity, in Jesus Christ, and you're not looking for someone to affirm your identity, you know, you're very confident in who you are in Jesus Christ, and then you know that marriage is not a feeling. You're not going to get to a place where you feel ready for marriage, for lack of a better word, but that it is a commitment that you make. Then why not just get married? You know, it sounds to me like it shouldn't really matter that you spend too much time ideally getting to know a person, because isn't that what marriage is about? It's a lifetime of getting to know a person. And I am not sufficiently convinced that you would have enough knowledge of a person in the dating season as you would in marriage. And so I think that then you come into marriage, first, when you're deciding to get married, I do think that there are things that you need to know about someone. And I think the most important one of those is, does this person truly love Jesus Christ? If they are a Christian, and are they truly committed to the work of the Holy Spirit in them? And then is this a person I can relate with? Is this a person I can enjoy getting to know? And I think when those two things are in place, in my opinion, then marriage should happen, isn't it? Am I pushing?
Happen easily.
It should happen easily.
No, to your point,
Yeah.
I like this question, and I also dislike this question.
Yeah.
Because it is a very subjective question, and everything that you have presented on the surface is very true, right?
Yes.
If we've
Yes.
then why not?
Then why not? Yeah.
But I think a couple of things. One, I feel like, especially as believers,
Yeah.
as the body of Christ,
Yeah.
we have done a disservice and a disjustice
Yeah.
to many, many single couples or singles who
Single
are dating
people,
or
yeah.
single people who are in the process of dating or whatnot.
Yeah.
And just expressing the realities
Yeah.
of marriage.
Yes.
Like, it's beautiful. It is
Yeah.
God's covenant. He designed it. I think I could say there's probably nothing better in the
Yeah.
sense of God has created this thing,
Yeah.
and he has made it so it's beautiful, right? But it's also work.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people, it's taboo to say that marriage is hard work, but
Yeah.
it's good work.
It is good
It
work.
sometimes is difficult work,
Yeah.
but it's good
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we're honest about that enough, because
Yeah.
it takes work.
Yeah.
And it's the work that makes it even more worth it in times
Yeah.
when those feelings are fleeting, or in
Yeah.
times when, you don't feel in love,
Yeah.
but you've made this covenant, you've
Yeah.
made this commitment.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, it would be beautiful, actually, if we also coached single people to treat their dating process
Yeah.
with the same level of commitment
Commitment.
and commitment to
Yeah.
the work as they would when they're in marriage. So in our case, like he mentioned, it was a short courting period, it was a short dating process, and even
Yeah.
to engagement.
Yeah.
But it's because we had a lot of tough conversations.
Yes.
And to your other question, the reason dating is so important is
Yeah.
because when you're in someone's space enough,
Yeah.
you start to, again, discover things about them. You reveal things that aren't just coming out casually in everyday conversation.
Yeah.
Meaning, we were able to start to see each other's conflict styles.
Yeah.
We were able to see, like we talked a lot about our families of origin. And so I could see, oh, he's behaving this way and responding this way because he was raised this way and da da da. And that is very much in conflict to how I was raised and the way
Yes.
that my mother, presented this and da da da.
Yeah.
So conflict style, love languages, those simple things, what are the personality characteristics? Because oftentimes, even though finances, yeah, like you should talk about those things as you
Yeah.
are dating,
Yeah.
because those are the things that you don't have to be surprised about.
Yeah.
And those are the things that I think that make it difficult if you haven't talked about them when you do actually get married.
Yeah.
That come as a shock, and then you're having to work, so much more through.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, like, ugh,
Yeah.
we're so different in these areas. But if we
Yeah.
had talked about those things in advance,
Yeah.
do you want to have kids? If you're a believer, like, pray. You should be praying as faithfully in your dating process as you would in your marriage,
would in your marriage.
because God should be leading those things anyway. So anyway, I think
Yeah.
I went on a tangent.
I'll
but-
say two other things just really briefly about marriage and our perception of marriage.
Yeah.
We have a fantasy world perception of marriage as opposed to a biblical understanding of marriage. Into the theological, which people can debate or not debate.
Yeah.
My theological perception of marriage, most people do not have a one person. Most people, it's not one person that God has ordained for you to marry. Some people do. There are some people who God has set this person apart for you. But most people, God has given us the free will to choose the person we want to do life with based on all of these things we're talking about.
Yes.
And so most often, long dating processes,
Yeah.
is this the one? Is this the one? Is this the one?
Yes.
Is this the one you're going to commit to? Not the
Yes.
one is God set apart. Can you
Yes.
commit to this person?
Yes.
So really asking, can I commit to this person? Is this
Yes,
the one
yes.
I am going to commit to?
Yeah.
Because there's many people we could make it work with.
Yeah.
And then the other one is, so it was something along the same lines, which I don't know if it's going to come back to me now, but our perception of marriage, everything having to be perfect. Oh, that's it. Non-negotiables. We have too many, again, in the fantasy realm, too many things. They have to be tall. They have to be this color. They have to be like this. They have to talk like this. They can't
Yeah.
talk like this. And our list of non-negotiables
Yeah.
is silly.
Yeah.
Our list of non-negotiables should be very, 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 very short.
Yeah.
And so we've given too many stipulations.
Yeah.
Nobody can fit those expectations.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
opposed to saying nobody's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Let me choose you, and God's going to work on me to be more like Him through loving you, an imperfect person, and vice versa.
Yeah.
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 So, I mean, our engagement was short, our dating process, but not everybody's should be that short.
Not
yeah.
everybody should be that.
If you start dating at 18,
Yeah.
you shouldn't.
You shouldn't.
Most of the time, you're not mature enough spiritually
don't need
or
to.
emotionally to get
Yeah.
mature. So you may have a longer dating period.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing for an American Christian to say, man, because I know American, well, now a bit different from historically, but a lot of American Christian marry really young. I know a friend of mine has a son, 21-year-old son who's getting married. So traditionally, American Christians have married really, really young. So it's not the age. If you ask me, it's the level of maturity.
It's true.
And you can find a 21-year-old who's really mature
can.
and who's really grounded in Christ. Two things you guys have said that, again, this is a really good conversation for me because you're dropping really good nuggets. You talked about having tough conversation in the dating season. Many people wait to have tough conversations when it's too late. At what point of the dating do you want to start having those tough conversations? And what are tough conversations? I mean, do you go on your first date and say, tell me about how you handle money? At what do you think there is a point at which a dating couple may be ready to start having tough conversations? And what are tough conversations?
He asked you.
Yeah, I think, again, it varies. And I don't know if there's a specific, after 2 months, after 3 months.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, you get to the point where you're still interested enough in this person that you start
Yes.
thinking, oh,
Yeah.
this could be long term. Or, oh, I could see myself, So no, on the first date,
Yeah.
probably
No.
not. Do not ask that person, how many kids they want to have. But again, depending on, it
Yeah.
varies. But yeah, I think as you get to the point where you're both, and I also think that some of those conversations begin to start naturally.
Yeah.
In the first couple of months, you're already asking this person, so what are your goals? If you know what they do for work, you're asking, what are your ambitions? And, where do you see? Do you like to travel? So all of those things are coming out,
Yeah.
and you're getting a sense of the lifestyle that this person would like to lead.
Yeah.
And if it aligns with things that you're also interested in,
Yeah.
and if it would be a fit.
Yeah.
So I think at that point, I don't know if there's a number, but then, yeah, you can just say, hey, like, I feel like this is going somewhere.
Yeah.
I feel like, we are a good fit. Are
Yeah.
you also in the place where you are sensing that this could be something long term for us? And
Yeah.
I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And that the other person may not be in that place, and that's okay. But if
Yeah.
you are,
Yeah.
then it's probably good to get a
Yeah.
good sense of whether you're on the same page, even
Yeah.
at that stage, if it's
Yeah.
early in the dating relationship.
Yeah.
But
Can I ask you just on that question, something that may be more culturally different in my thinking? Who leads the conversations? Is it the man or the woman?
I mean, again, historically in Kenya, we're still more of a patriarchal
Yes.
culture
Yes.
where the man is responsible for leading some of those conversations. Now it's changing for sure.
Yeah.
In our culture, either or.
Yeah.
But even in our culture, though, I think that sometimes women are intimidated and they have become made in again, dynamics, right? Cultural
Yeah.
dynamics. But I think a lot of times women are a bit more apprehensive, even though they want to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Women are a bit more apprehensive
Yeah.
because they don't want to seem like they're, too
Too
eager,
forward,
they're
too
pushy, they're
eager.
being too
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
So I think it can be both.
Yeah.
But I think oftentimes women will wait until they get to the point where they're just being impatient and they can't wait anymore. Like,
Yeah.
like we've been dating for like 8 months and I still have no idea if, so then
Yeah.
she might take the initiative.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it varies.
And some of it, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's apprehensive, and it's also, is this man going to be responsible?
Yeah.
Is this man going to lead our home? Is this man going to be thinking of the things? So in some ways, I think it's, whether it's conscious or unconscious, it's almost like a testing of, is he going to be the one to lead? Is
Yeah.
he going to have these conversations?
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think it is a conscious thought for the woman to say,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it because I want to see him
I
do
want
it.
to see him do it.
Others, they may not realize that they're doing it.
Yeah.
But some of that apprehension or
Yeah.
waiting
Yeah.
is just, what kind of man is this? Which isn't always a bad thing either.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So you live in Kenya now. You had your wedding in the US, but you live in Kenya.
Had our baby in Kenya.
You
though.
had your baby in Kenya. Have you by the way given your baby a Kenyan name?
Oh no.
He has an Ethiopian name
Yeah,
and a
he-
Nigerian name.
Nigerian name, but he doesn't have.
Not
Yeah,
yet.
it's
I
true.
feel betrayed.
Aw, you can help us.
We'll
We
find
had a
name.
Kenyan name picked out if it was a girl.
It's
If it
true.
was, yeah.
Yeah, we had a
we did.
name perfectly picked out.
Okay. We'll find a Kenyan name. We'll find a Kenyan name for him. So you live in Kenya. Most of your friends here are Kenyans. So most of the people you do your marriage around are Kenyans. How does this shape your perspective on family? How has being in Kenya a different culture from yours, and definitely how family would be done in the US? How has being here shaped your perspective on marriage and family?
For me, there's some really good things
Yeah.
that I've enjoyed about Kenyan culture and around marriage specifically. Like the concept of best couple
Yeah.
is not a concept I was familiar with
Yeah.
in the US.
Yeah.
I would have my own best man, who's probably my best friend.
Yes.
She would have her own maid of honor,
Maid of
who's
honor.
probably her best friend.
Yeah.
They may not ever have met or
Yeah.
know each other. But in
Yeah.
Kenya, you have a couple who's more mature,
Yeah.
who you think is going to walk you through the journey of marriage and
Yeah.
life together. I love that. I think that's great. You've set
Even
yourself
though
up.
that's also changing now.
Is it?
It's changing a lot, yeah. Yeah.
I don't think it should.
I don't think it should either. We didn't have a couple as our best couple. I had a friend, and my wife had her friend being her maid of honor, and that relationship has changed over time. And I've also done weddings where the best couple was not a couple. But how we've now had to design it in church is, if you want a best couple, if you want your best friend to be your best best man, that's fine. But if you're going to marry you, then we will do your premarital counseling, and then we will assign you a mentor couple.
It's good.
We'll assign you a mentor couple, and that mentor couple will work with you on your own initiative at least a year, at least for a year after your marriage, because we recognize the navigating the first year of marriage can be challenging to most people, but it is changing, and you will see more people having weddings where the best couple is not a couple. Yeah, it's not a married couple.
So I think that concept, at least, having a couple that you've identified before you're married,
Yes.
who's there at your wedding day,
Yes.
this is the couple who's going to walk with us. I
Yes.
hadn't heard that in the
Yeah.
US, so I
Yeah.
think that's really great. That's one. A second one is the connected to that.
Yeah.
And I know this also may not be Kenyan wide, but in the circles, at least Nairobi
Yeah.
Chapel, some of the circles that I've been in Kenya, having someone who she can go to without having to clear me with
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
If we're having issues, if we're having dome,
Yeah.
if there's problems, and
Did
she
you say
can't get
Dome?
through,
Did you just say Dome?
if she can't get through to me,
Yeah.
there's someone like yourself who's a
Yeah.
good friend of mine,
Yeah.
who I have already given her advanced permission to
Yeah.
talk to.
Yeah.
To talk to about our issues, so that you and I can sit down and
Yeah.
we can have a conversation, and you
Yeah.
can try and speak to me from a different perspective.
Yeah.
That was also new to me, and I think that's really helpful. It's not the first person she goes to. She tries with me first, and then she knows if she's not getting through, she has that permission, and vice versa. I would have someone that I could go to as
You
well.
could go to.
I hadn't known that. That was really great. And then I think the third thing I would say is the family communal dynamic.
Yeah.
Before separation, before divorce, again, this is historical in Kenya, you go to the family, the aunts and uncles, you sit down with the family, maybe
Yeah.
the cousins, the brothers and sisters,
Yeah.
and you have a conversation in your home about what's happening, and they give you wisdom and guidance, and you talk about it with the family
Yeah.
before informing the family we've separated and we're getting
Yeah.
a divorce.
Yeah.
Now, in some cultures in the US, that is there.
Yeah.
But the predominant way in which I've seen it here is much more so than our individualistic
Yeah, yeah.
society and culture in
Yeah,
Kenya, in the
yeah.
US, which I
Yeah.
think is great.
It's more communal. Marriage is done more communally here.
Yeah.
Do you have those couples that you have mentioned where she knows she can go to someone without having to clear with you, or is that work in progress? Do you know someone you can go to?
Well, I mean, I know
If he
who
was
I can
being
go to. for
in Kenya, we
sure.
say tough-headed. If he was
Yeah,
being
yeah.
tough-headed with you,
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
We've not identified specific people,
Yeah.
but we have people in each other's lives
Yeah.
who we wouldn't be upset if we went to.
Yeah.
I have a few friends that if she went to them,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be upset that she went to them,
yeah,
because it's you, it's Jenga, it's a few
Yeah.
other people that
yeah,
okay, if she's going to them,
yeah,
I'm probably in the wrong, and I should be having the conversation. So it's
Yeah.
okay that she went to them.
yeah, yeah,
So we haven't sat down and said this person, this person, this person,
yeah,
but we are free enough in the relationship and secure enough in understanding.
yeah.
These are the people that we can have a conversation with.
Yeah. Before Talare comes in to answer this question on Kenya culture shaping, how it has shaped your perspective, what you're mentioning to me sounds like accountability. And is that an important thing to have? Do you think it's an important thing for married couples to have accountability?
So
What is it useful to? Yeah.
And that comes into defining what is accountability.
Yeah.
Most of us have an improper view of accountability.
Yeah.
We usually think it's someone from the outside telling us what we should do.
What you should do, yeah.
And so they're trying to control how we act. They're trying to control our interactions. They're trying to dictate what we do.
Yeah.
I see accountability as the other way around. I see accountability as we are making a decision to inform other people of everything that we're doing. And then they can give us wisdom and guidance and mentorship, which we can take or don't have to take.
Yeah.
They have, we would say, high accountability, low control. So we
Yeah.
are highly accountable to this person,
Yes.
this couple,
Yeah.
and we share everything with them.
Yeah.
But they can't or aren't in a position to control what we do,
Yes. Yes.
if that makes sense.
It does. It does.
And I think that's really important for every couple in person to have.
Very
Yeah,
true.
And I
Yeah.
think the thing that helps for those couples, for those people who are accountability partners, I think probably the most significant piece of that accountability is, are we pointing you back to Jesus?
Yes.
For those who are believers and involved in, a body of Christ community, like that's the number one point of your accountability. Like, are you pointing us and our covenant back to Jesus?
Back to Jesus.
And that, yeah.
So basically, accountability is not really someone to ask you, questions or to control you, but really someone to help you find your way back
Yeah.
to Jesus and center your marriage
Right.
continue to center your marriage on
It's
Christ.
true. Now, of course, there are realities that we have to navigate. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes our personalities will clash, and
Yeah.
sometimes these differences, these arguments will happen.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
at the beginning of the day, really, you know,
Yeah.
like you're saying,
Yeah.
it's a covenant.
It's a covenant.
And the center of the thing should always be Jesus.
Jesus.
Should always be the thing that God has established.
Yeah.
So are you pointing us in the, despite the clashes,
Yeah.
what is
Back to
Jesus saying
Jesus.
to you?
Yeah.
And how are you serving?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You, Saleria, did not live in Kenya before marriage. So Matt may have had some advantage of experience being in Kenya when you got here and you started living here. And have you had to learn to catch up to,
Wow.
you know,
Yes.
just
and
in terms of that Kenyan culture shaping some of your perspective?
Definitely. I mean, everything, right?
Yeah.
I've been picked up from one place of different, very different culture in many ways, and,
Yes.
and just plopped into another one. So we were starting our marriage as I was starting my cross-cultural experience. So one, like you said, his advanced experience, his, you know, having been here many years, he served as my cultural coach, you know. So I think that's also one of the things that actually did help our marriage, right? Like it helped
Yeah.
us because we originally come from a similar culture.
Yeah.
So we had those things to relate about. So he had already experienced many of the things that were confusing to me, the things that were frustrating to me. So I could say it so many times. I'm like, but they said this, and then I said this, and then they said this. What did they say? You know, what were they actually saying? And he'd
Yeah.
have to say, oh, okay, well, I bet, you know,
Yeah.
this, and this. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know, from a Kenyan perspective, this is how these things normally happen. Oh, so this is what they were saying. So, it was tremendously helpful to have someone who related with me from a similar culture,
Yeah.
but also had been here, you
Yeah.
know, many years prior
Yeah.
to help me navigate those things. And we were in ministry, imagine, right?
Yeah.
So now we're dealing with people, not dealing, but, you know, we're serving people,
Yeah.
which is a whole other thing, you know. So being able to just come in with a perspective of being curious and learning, asking questions, empathy, you know. So I'm not making assumptions about things that I don't understand. All of those things were incredibly helpful to have him. And yes, my entire paradigm was shifted.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you had any conflict that has had to do with your cultural differences? Like, you see, this is
This week, or
have you had any serious
Today or
this morning?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to start?
Go ahead.
No, I don't. Go ahead. You can.
yes. And so there's, I mean, again, many different cultural. So, woman, man, cultural differences.
Yes.
Cincinnati is the city she's from. It's a bigger city,
Yeah.
smaller city, from a different state.
Yeah.
Different cultural dynamics within states, within you know, dynamics, big city, small city.
Yeah.
White, black. So there's a number of different components
Yeah.
to which areas of culture we have in conflict on. And so we've had a number of them. You know, a big one is I didn't even realize I was white until I came to Africa. So like I knew I was white skinned, but I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know inherently what does it mean for me to be white.
Yes.
What are all the things that are connected to my whiteness?
Yeah.
And even though I had been in Africa for a long time, and previously married to a Kenyan in a biracial, interracial relationship, the cultural racial tension in the U.S. is not here. It's a different type of tension, and it's much, much different.
Yes.
So, you know, and this goes to ministry, this goes to everything. When I walk into a room as a white American male, I am perceived in a specific and certain way, and it's usually elevated without reason. They don't know me.
Yeah.
They don't know my history. They don't know my education.
Yeah.
In most rooms I walk into, I'm given a position of power and privilege, whether I deserve it or not.
Yeah.
Which is what happens in the U.S. But it became very obvious to me that my whiteness had certain privileges and power, certain things that were ascribed to me as a white and a white American male that I had never noticed before in the U.S. Now, when we get married, So I had some understanding. I had some and I'm passionate about culture on a global level. So equity and equality from nation to nation, from tribe to tribe, from different people groups. I'm very passionate about that. On the micro scale in the U.S., where it's highly racialized, I was still I'm in a very much a learning phase and a learning program where. I've come some ways and I have some more ways to go. And now that was escalated when we got together, and especially when we got married, because there was a lot of things that were unconscious and implicit biases for me as a white man in a racial interracial relationship, but then just in general that I didn't realize that she's had to deal with every day of her life as a black woman in the U.S.
Yeah.
And so that created some tension for us that I needed to hear from her and from other people, and I needed to read about, and I needed to do some other things to begin to understand some of the dynamics of what it means for us to be together, for me, and all of the things that have come to her and upon her, the wounds that have been incurred by people that look and act and think and speak like me. And so that had has had some dynamics for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the thing that he discovered, that as we were discovering together, right? Just like you said, because if you know anything about the United States, it's a majority white culture. Black Americans are the minority, and so he grew up, of course, majority, but then very young in his adulthood, he came here, where there weren't those dynamics. So just like you said, he wasn't necessarily aware until he came here. So one of the challenges came because he's done a lot, like he said, he's done a lot of work when it comes to intercultural studies, engagement. He's been to I don't know how many different countries, right? And one of his strengths is that he is able to go into a culture, learn about that culture, ask great questions, and learn to discern and all of those things. But the thing that I think was overlooked significantly is that because he went from the U.S. as a majority, coming here to where those dynamics weren't necessarily affecting him, he had gone so many years of his adulthood without actually having some of those biases and, what we would say whiteness. There's such an unawareness, right? So many of those things that now me, coming from that racial culture, I'm able to now challenge him, in difficult ways, but also necessary ways, to be like, I hear what you're saying, but do you realize that you're saying that from a very biased lens? Like you're saying that from a very white lens, where of course he's here in Kenya. Nobody has, you don't have those dynamics. So it was almost like he started doing a lot of work as we were getting engaged, but the real work didn't really start until we got here. And now, of course, we're out of that environment. So it's just me and him, you know what I mean? Now, of course, we have friends that we can, but I was seemingly his sole accountability in some of those difficult conversations where a whole lot of unawareness and a whole lot of, baggage that, of course, I'm bringing into these conversations, but also insight into things that he has been completely unaware of for most of his life. So the work has just begun, but it has been difficult.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I don't want to get off that point, so keep that question in mind, but I do want to mention, because I do a lot of work with missionaries and church planters who go to other places in the world. And so the understanding of your starting point is important in ministry, also in marriage. And if you don't understand the cultural and societal identity that you bring into the conversation, that you bring into your evangelism, that you bring into your relationships, you can set yourself up for detrimental in the relationship, but also for the gospel. So, like, for instance, when I come to Africa, let's just say Kenya, many rooms I walk into, people just assume that everything I say is true. Without question, without thinking about it, it's just.
I mean,
just
look at your
assumption.
face. You look like a very honest man.
Exactly. White people are more honest. White people are more trusting. Americans know more. There's these really unfortunate biases that I come with. Now, if I don't know those things, I can come here and just start making decisions, doing things, moving forward, and it's really hurtful and harmful for the culture I'm working with and the people I'm working with. But because I'm seen as the leader and the knowledgeable person, I don't get the feedback that I need. So I can make a lot of mistakes at the beginning. Now, reverse, let's say that you, as a Lunga, go to, let's just say, the UK. Predominantly white, majority white, normative white. You are starting from a deficit. They see you as black, so they don't trust you. Then you open your mouth. You're like, not only is he black, but he's black African, black Kenyan. They may not even know where Kenya is. They just know you're black African, somewhere around the country of Africa. So now you're another deficit, right? you think, coming from a normative black, one of the largest tribes, a male, a pastor, highly respected, that you can walk into a room and people will just hear you, understand you, give you honor and respect. And now people don't want to listen to you. They don't give you the time of the day. You can't even build a relationship because they don't want you in their home.
Yeah.
And now you get frustrated.
Yeah.
And so you either go into the business world or you just try and reach Kenyans because it's just easier.
Yeah.
Your starting point is I need to spend more time with my white brothers and sisters to let them know who I am, build
Yeah.
relationship, build that trust before
Yeah.
I can start preaching the gospel,
Yeah.
as opposed to coming in, doing evangelism and crusades and things, and people like this African man.
Yeah. You've reminded me of an event. I spoke at a dinner once in the UK, and when I finished, I remember this old lady walking to me, this old English woman, and being very surprised that I could speak English. And I could speak English very well. And it didn't help that I was skinnier then than I am now. So I was black, skinny, and you know, it was surprising. But you're saying that it is important to be aware, and especially for a marriage, and even in terms of sharing the gospel, it is important to be aware of the biases that you carry and the potential of those biases to affect how you are perceived. And for someone like you, Matt, it's you do a lot in terms of evangelism and sharing the gospel with the work that you do. People are more likely to listen to you on the basis of the biases that you carry, even though you have not wished these biases on yourself. So it's important to be aware. How do you insulate yourself? How do you insulate even your marriage from the challenges of, different cultural experiences, and how those cultural experiences shape your expectations of each other? Yeah.
That's a good question. I almost wonder, I don't know if that's a thing. Now, there is some insulation from, so for instance, if we were still living in the US
Yeah.
or in the UK, right, there would probably be more overt racism towards us, or discrimination or bias, and not a lot of circles, but some, right?
Yeah,
There
yeah.
would be some, there would still be that where we would, be talked about or criticized or whatever for being in a interracial marriage. Like that is still a thing, unfortunately.
Even here,
Yeah, but it's
Even here,
different, right?
yeah.
It's much more passive. It's
Yeah.
much more, what's that white guy doing with that black girl? But then once they realize I'm American, then it also
Yeah.
lowers those barriers a lot.
Yeah.
So we're not having to deal with a lot of overt, like, what's wrong
occasionally
with
when
you
we're
people?
walking around,
Yeah.
she'll get a comment, and most of it's in Swahili, but I
Right,
can pick up
right,
enough
sure.
that they assume she's a prostitute. They assume she's a Kenyan prostitute.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's happened, very rarely. But it's, again, it would be more overt
In the US.
if we were still in the States.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing. I also think, though, that so we can insulate ourselves from those external things, but I don't know if there really is insulating from
The
the
internal.
the inner relational aspects of race and culture and things like that. Because now, again, for the things that are more surface level, we laugh a lot about those things, like different movies that he watched, different ways in which he handles silverware, or just silly things.
Silverware.
The toothpaste tube, just
Yeah.
silly things, like, why would you do that? My mom told me to do this, and your mom. So we laugh
Yeah.
about a lot of
Yeah.
things like that. But then the
Yeah.
deep stuff,
Yeah.
there's really no insulating, because
Yeah.
we have to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that personally, I know that I had to be very aware of was not harboring bitterness
Yeah.
over the journey that he was just beginning.
Yeah.
Because, some of these things he literally does not know. And
Yeah.
because he hasn't been challenged in these things, it's also sometimes, it had been difficult for him to even not be defensive as I'm bringing some of these actual realities to him,
Yeah. Yeah.
presenting them like,
Yeah.
you said this thing. Do you realize that this is how this came across? Do you realize that this is your, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of conflict in the sense of being able to have those conversations well, lovingly, which was a learning curve on both of our parts,
Yeah.
right? To do it in a way where we actually want this person to receive what we're saying,
Yeah.
learn from it, so
Yeah.
that the the symptom of what this root conversation doesn't continue, if that makes sense. So getting to the root of these things to be like, oh, this is why, this is what you're missing, this is what I'm missing. How do we avoid this in the future?
Yeah.
So it looked a lot of different ways, but some of
Yeah.
those conversations were definitely challenging,
Yeah.
and sometimes hurtful,
Yeah.
but also I don't think that we could or should insulate from them, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Some of it, I think, is a couple of things. Preparing yourself for them before they come. So continue learning,
Yeah.
continue to ask questions,
Yeah.
continue. So like choosing to watch movies or series about her culture or mine,
Yeah.
reading books
Yeah.
from me as a white person about the dynamics and the history and all this stuff, because then as I'm reading, I'm learning, as she's reading and learning now, she's ahead of the journey because she's had to live. When you're in the minority, you're having to understand both sides very, very clearly. And because you need to be able to engage in both sides. So you know why you're the minority. So as a woman, she knows what makes her a woman as opposed to a man. As a black person, she knows what makes her a black person in the US and where I didn't know those things. So she's ahead in the journey and is a coach in many ways.
Yeah.
Not that she doesn't have anything to learn, but she's
Yeah.
learned a lot.
Yeah.
So for me, it's how do I continue to learn? And then when it's not an issue, let's have the quick conversations and talk about it and discuss it so that as it becomes an issue, we can go back and say, oh, yeah, we did talk about that. Oh, this is a manifestation of this conversation we had 2 months ago, last
Yeah.
year, another
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So they're just realizing for something as intense. So for Kenyans, it may be tribalism.
Yeah.
Something that's really tense and could be a tension in a marriage.
Yeah.
Have the conversations when it's not tense.
Yeah.
Learn about it. Have
Yeah.
discussions.
Yeah.
So that when it does become an issue,
Yeah.
you have something to kind of fall back on. And then have friends.
Yeah.
So I have other black friends. I have other people I can talk to, and they
Yeah.
are also educating me as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned Kenya and I like about what I like about America is the the cultural tensions in the different races. They are there, and there are conversations that are happening about those tensions. I mean, there may not be a solution, but there are conversation, and I think more and more. Correct me if I'm wrong. More and more, there is a sensitivity around them and a realization for some people about the reality of those tensions and the impact they have on people. In Kenya, we do have some cultural tension, and you talked about tribalism, but we never, we don't own them, and we never really have these conversations about. We never really get open about having conversations about tribalism and the impact of those of tribalism on relationships until someone is going to get married to someone of a different tribe, and then the families can't get together, and there's tension. I know at least two couples that are close to me that the tension of tribalism has greatly impacted how they relate with each other, and even at when they were beginning to talk about marriage, and they couldn't marry. One couple in particular had to wait 7 years for their parents to come along. But you see, it's a tension that we don't talk about. But culture does affect relationship. It does impact relationship. And the last question I want to ask you is, for a couple like you, that we spoke about the gap being very obvious, very evident, what is the role then of grace as a Christian couple in relating with one another? Grace and forgiveness in relating with one another, keeping in mind the very different backgrounds you come from. Yeah.
One of the things, and I think this is every marriage,
Yeah.
to my understanding of talking with couples, working with couples, and just understanding the first year or two, whether you're knowing it or not, you're trying to make the other person to be like you,
Yes.
trying to force them to talk to you this way and do this thing this way and do this thing this way. And there's this
it's
often
not been first year for me. It's the whole lot of 5 years
Yeah.
trying to get my wife to be taller. I'm tired of having to get things off the shelf for her. Do it yourself.
and I think some people hold on to that,
Yeah.
and it is detrimental to the relationship. And I think what you're talking about, if we can't love the person unconditionally as they are,
Yeah.
then there's never any entrance for grace and
Yeah.
forgiveness into the relationship.
Yeah.
Because we stay resentful and bitter
Yeah.
about what they aren't and what we wish they were, that we actually can't love and see them for the good, wonderful person that they are, despite their faults and their issues and their challenges. Some of them legitimately need to be corrected. Some of them are just different. When I do cultural coaching and my cultural trainings, the thing that I tell people, what I'm really trying to accomplish is to increase the gray area in your life, which is
Yeah.
grace.
Yeah.
Most of us have a block of black and a block of white.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, good, bad,
Yeah.
viable, not viable. And there's no area in between that says, oh, that's just different. That's okay. And in cultural interactions, like in marriage, the more we can increase that gray grace area, the better we're going to be in our relationships,
Yeah.
whether it's a marriage or a friendship across a culture.
Yeah.
And the wider the gap, the more important that gray area needs to be large.
Yeah.
Not to say there's not white and black, right and wrong, good or bad, viable, not viable, because there is. The Bible's clear about that. But often we think the Bible says more than it does.
Yeah.
And we get into traditions and actions more so than the realities of values and principles.
Yeah.
And so once we can accept somebody for as they are, and we can then eagerly understand and learn about their history, their background, their origin, it enables us to then allow grace and mercy and forgiveness to flow. And until we get to that point, the tension is just going to be sky high.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You asked what is the role of grace? It is the number one role. Like it is the center point, because what that grace represents the love of Jesus and the price that he paid, the sacrifice of Jesus, so that we could also have grace and be loved,
Yeah.
and be saved. You know, all of the things that come with
Yeah.
who Jesus is.
Yeah.
So I think it is the center point. It is the starting point of the
Yeah.
relationship, because if you, like he said, if you can't have grace, that means you can't have empathy. That means you can't have forgiveness, you know, all of those things that come with it. And so we are literally trying to be who Jesus is to us in our marriage. So if you don't have grace, like, one, you can't grow, you can't learn,
Yeah.
you can't do anything really, because you will just be stuck in a place of bitterness, of resentment, of unforgiveness, which is not Jesus. And so I think for us, you know, we've tried to continually again point each other to Jesus in that, so that, like you said, if there's something we don't like, or something even something difficult that we're trying to work through, the ability to have grace is the thing that allows us to stay centered and keep the covenant that we have committed to in the forefront of our minds,
Yeah.
because that is who Jesus is to us.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
And then understanding when you're operating in grace and when you're not, and maybe needing to take a time out
Yeah.
so that you don't do something that is irrevocable,
Yeah.
or at least hurtful,
Yeah.
that could have lasting impact.
Yeah.
And that's an important part of it too.
Absolutely. And always remembering that you can only give grace to the extent that you receive grace
It's true.
from Jesus Christ
true.
himself.
It's true.
Thank you, Matt and Teleria for coming to Healing for the Family.
Thanks for having us. We're grateful.
We should do this again sometime.
Oh, that would
Around.
be fun.
Asanteni sana.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on tonight's episode of Healing for the Family. We were talking marriage, culture, and ministry with Matt and Teleria Mila. Have a good night. We are praying for your family.